Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Audible, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have two wonderful guests for you today. Later on in the show, we're going to meet young author Kara Eng. She's here to celebrate her debut picture book. It's called Sweet and Sour. But first up, our friends at Reach Out and Read are returning to the show. Dr. Dipesh Navsaria. He's here to talk a little bit more about the Reach Out and Read mission and how you can help. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back, written by Stephen Joseph and illustrated by Andy Case. In this third installment of the Snoodles series, the Zoodles are determined to have their revenge. With the help of a grimy millionaire who's fallen on hard times, they intend to poison the Earth's water supply and turn everyone into willy-nillys and dilly-dallies. Can Brianna and Ricky save the Earth again? Will the outcast kids on the other side of the track rise to the challenge and help save the world? You can find out with Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back. Are you looking for the perfect gift for a young reader? Woofy and the Dinosaur Dig Adventure, the second book in the Woofy series, is an exciting choice that fosters creativity, friendship, and teamwork. Join Woofy, a small gray stuffed dog, on his thrilling quest to help his friends excavate a T-Rex in the mountains. Young readers will enjoy his humorous adventures and admire his skills as a pup paleontologist, all set in a beautifully illustrated lyrical story. Authored by Helen Rogenson, retired award-winning teacher honored with the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. This book encourages lifelong learning while supporting charities for animal rescues and children in need. Don't miss out. Visit us at unpackyourownhappy.com and connect with us on Instagram at unpackyourownhappy. My friends, I have been told I have a great radio voice. I'm not sure if I do, but our guest today has a really great radio voice and some great knowledge that he's here to share with us. He's coming to us from Reach Out and Read, and we're going to be talking today about poverty and the impact it has on early relational health. Please welcome to the show Dr. Dipesh Navsaria. Dr. Dipesh, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me.
Love having you on. Talk, please, a little bit. Just remind people who haven't heard our conversations with Trudy Hecton or Marty Martinez, a little bit about Reach Out and Read, please.
Yeah, so Reach Out and Read is an early literacy program. We work with clinicians, so doctors, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, anyone who provides primary care to children. We train them to use those all-important checkups that happen so often in the first 5 years of life, to use that opportunity to talk to families about shared books, about reading together on a regular basis, and not just to tell them in a one-way sort of, you read to your kids, right, to which the answer is always yes, but to ask how it's going, do some troubleshooting, some skill building, or just simply reinforcement and encouragement that, hey, parent, you're doing a great job.
Yeah. I really love the concept of Reach Out and Read. I'm delighted that it was founded here in my beautiful city of Boston. Mm-hmm. I think it's so important. And I love that you recognize that if you just ask, kind of like asking your kid, how was your day at school? Great, fine, whatever. You're asking a parent, hey, are you reading with your kid? Every parent's going to say yes. And that's not going to be very helpful.
Just like how we all floss our teeth twice a day, of course, right?
Of course. And, it's easy for us. And one of the things when I launched Reading with Your Kids, after we were publishing for a couple of years, I sat down with my wife who taught in the Boston Public Schools for 34 years. And I said, I have a feeling I'm preaching to the choir. People who are tuning into Reading with Your Kids are reading with their kids. How can we reach your families? And, she noted a number of obstacles. And one of them was the fact that, we're really lucky. We're able to go out and buy books for our kids every week, every couple of weeks, whatever, give them money to the Scholastic book fair. But there are an awful lot of families that can't afford those books. And talk, please, a little bit about that and just, as I said, how that poverty, lack of resources affects the relationship kids have with the people in their lives.
Yeah, so there's a few elements here. So one is how poverty affects the ability of families to carry out things simply because they don't have the resources or materials. So as you just alluded to, right, if you can't afford books easily, then that becomes a challenge right then and there. Now, we have some ways around that. There's many excellent programs that give books to children. There's public libraries, right, which have excellent penetration, even in rural areas. There's great bookmobile programs and so on and so forth. But there's another piece to this, which is, remember, book sharing is not really about the book alone. Otherwise, we just dump books on children and say, great, we're done, right? That's nothing more that we need to do there. There needs to be a loving, caring adult on the other end of that book, especially the younger the child. Just because your child can read doesn't mean that you shouldn't be sharing books with them on a regular basis. But those young kids, sure, that's a challenge. And this gets to this concept of what we call relational health, which is the health of relationships. So let's say you have a parent who says, I love reading to my child. I'm confident at being able to read to my child, and I want to do it every night. But, gosh, I'm working 2 jobs or 3 jobs because I'm trying to make sure we can make rent, right? When poverty interferes with the ability of parents to do the job of high-quality parenting that they'd like to do, well, that's a problem right then and there. And that's not going to be solved by throwing more books at that family. It's going to be solved by asking ourselves, what are we doing about living wages? What are we doing to lift some of these external sources of stress on families that already know and want to do the things that they should be doing and aren't able to?
So what do we do? It's that question. I have a young niece in my life who will be graduating from college next year, and she just purchased a car last night and took out as she said, her first big girl loan. And she's looking at having to get housing in a year or two. And the numbers are pretty crazy, even for someone like her who's coming from a family with resources.
Yeah, my own 2 kids are at the tail end of college, and looking at rents around here in Madison, Wisconsin is giving us all heartburn. And again, we're well resourced and all. Before I come to the solution, I want to point out one other element here that I think is important, which is sometimes you have a family that says, I've heard about the importance of reading with my child, or talking or singing or playing with them, especially at a young age. I've heard about how that's important for their brain circuitry and their development and their well-being and all that. But then they're saying, how do I do that? Right? It's not unusual that when all the years I've been doing Reach Out and Read, I get a parent of a 15-month-old who says to me when I ask about, so how often do you have a chance to share books together, that they'll say something like, oh, he used to like being read to, but he doesn't like it anymore. I say, oh, really? And read a few pages out loud from that book we just gave you. I'd like to see what they're doing. And what that parent is doing is they're reading exactly what it says on the page out loud to their kid, who they expect is supposed to sit quietly and listen. we think that reading to children is a natural, automatic, instinctual skill sometimes. But the reality is it isn't. It's actually learned behavior. Now, many of us learned it by watching other people do it in our surroundings. But if we didn't see that happening around us, how would we know?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what that parent needs is two things. One, they need modeling. They need coaching. They need to be told, hey, pull the kid up in your lap. Let them hold the book. Let them turn the pages. Go in whatever order you want. Talk about the pictures. You don't need to read every single word on the page in order. I'm not going to make you write an essay on this book, And once you give them permission to do that thing, which the technical term is dialogic reading, hold a dialogue over the book, it helps them be successful at reading with that squirmy toddler who has a naturally short attention span, and then kind of retain shared reading until that kid is a little bit older. Because there's another gap there. We talked about skill building and, showing them how to do this and modeling and coaching. The other gap is a confidence gap. Many people who are living in poverty often have had poor educational attainment themselves, right? They may have barely made it out of high school. They may not have graduated from high school, et cetera, et cetera. And they may be thinking in the back of their head, I'm the wrong person to be reading to my kid. I'm going to teach them the wrong things because then they'll struggle like I did. And then they put them in front of all this educational software and apps and videos and whatever that are largely marketing and have very poor evidence for efficacy, certainly in kids under about age 3 or so. So you see how many layers of this there are, right? We need to focus on bolstering the parent, supporting them where they're doing it right, helping build their confidence, and then the materials, all the books and all those sorts of things make a huge, huge difference. So when you ask, what can we do about it? At the micro level, at the family kind of level, it's providing this kind of support. It's providing this type of guidance, modeling and coaching, and doing this really intentional skill building of the adults that are in that child's life, because that supports relational health.
It sounds as if we're saying that what's on the page isn't all that important. It's time you're spending together. It's that dialogue that you're having, asking questions, pointing to things, asking the child to point to things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's even more true the younger the child is. Certainly, as they're getting a little bit older, toddlers, certainly preschoolers and so on, right? We care more about the content, the story, the richness, the depictions, the languages, all that stuff. It probably matters less, in terms of an infant. The other thing is that reading and these back and forth reciprocal interactions, right? What we call serve and return. It's like two people playing tennis and bouncing back and forth. What a loving, caring adult does when they're interacting with a child, those back and forth interactions can happen not just over reading, but they can happen playing peekaboo. They can happen in the grocery store. You got your kid in the shopping cart and you're pointing at things and saying, oh, what does it say on that cereal box? Is that a B on the box? Yes, it is. What color is that over there? Driving in the car, you see that red sign. It says stop, S-T-O-P, right? Those are literacy skills if no book is involved, So all of those things matter as well. This is not actually new material that science just figured out like last week or anything like that. The famed social psychologist Yuri Bronfenbrenner was once asked to sum up all the research. What does a child need more than anything else? And I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he said every child needs an adult who's absolutely crazy about them.
Yeah.
I'll make one small addition to that: is absolutely crazy about them and has the ability to show it. Right? Yeah. If the adult doesn't have health insurance and they don't have health care and mental health support and, living wages and things like that, it's really hard to do all of that. And that gets us back to the whole poverty question, right? When we move beyond what's happening in the family unit, let's think out at the community or even the society and policy levels. What are we doing to make sure that families have the resources they need and aren't struggling just to meet the basic needs that we all need?
Yeah. That was one of the issues that came up with in that conversation I had with my wife. You know, my
Mm-hmm.
my parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, and they're stretched beyond beyond all reason. As you're talking about the relational
Health.
experiences and having that dialogic experience, I remember coming back from the beautiful nation of Panama. My wife and I, we had a layover in Miami, and it was one of those nights where the 10-minute delay turned into a 5-hour delay. And in the meantime, we literally moved gates 5 times and terminals 1 time. And at the second gate move, we noticed this young mother with an infant and a 3-year-old,
Uh-huh.
both suitcases, traveling alone. And she was going to get on our plane. And so at that point, we decided to help her. And about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, this 3-year-old was running all around. And,
Sure.
you know, just as a 3-year-old should. And the mom wasn't able to do anything. And I just pulled out my phone and said, hey, I want to show you something. And just was showing this young guy pictures of my kids and talking about it. And he was asking questions, and it was magical because we sat together and we did that until the plane took off an hour and a half later.
Yeah. 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 And you were having that back and forth interaction. I imagine you were talking about the pictures and who was in these and what was going on in them, right? And that is dialogic exchange. And, you know, this would get off on a different tangent and is probably a different topic here, but how do digital devices distract not just kids, but also distract adults from these back and forth reciprocal interactions happening all the time?
Yes. My wife and I both have said a prayer of thanks that smartphones weren't available when my kids were young.
Sure.
You know, so what can we do now? You know, and we hear talk about inflation and the economy, but I don't hear talk about how can we support these families that we're talking about. How can we best support them? Because the investment we make in those kids and those families to help those relationships become healthy, they're going to pay off because we're going to spend a lot less on prisons. We're going to spend a lot less on remedial education in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So if you asked me that 5 years ago, the answer I would have had, and I still have, but I have an additional answer now as well, was that when people throw up their hands and say, how are we going to solve child poverty? Well, actually, we do have a pretty good blueprint for that. In the 1990s, under the Labor government of Tony Blair, the United Kingdom declared a war on child poverty. They incorporated a lot of innovations that actually were patterned often on things the U.S. had tried. Things like, home visiting, things like, child tax credits, things like maternal support and leave and parental leave in general, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What they did was, though, they put substantial investment in these, not small pilot projects here and there, and they did them all at once so that they would hopefully have a combined multiplicative effect together. And guess what? Child poverty rates in the UK plummeted. And the UK is a great one to look at because societally and value-wise, they're actually pretty close to the US in many ways. Everyone likes to look at like Sweden and Norway and all, but the social contract is different in those countries, right? They are high tax states, but you also get high services as a result. And that is something that we're just not into. That's fine. Let's look at the UK. So I used to tell people, well, if you want to know what to do, it's all been written in a single book by Jane Waldfogel at Columbia University called The UK's War on Child Poverty. Go look at that. The answers are there. We need to decide if we have the political will to do it. Now, let's fast forward 5 years and say, yes, and besides all the things I just said, well, we had a global pandemic happen. And we did lots of things that we wouldn't otherwise do from a policy perspective to address the extraordinary needs in the pandemic. And one of them was a child tax credit. We said to people, if you have a young child at home and you are at a certain income level or below, we will give you money back. and you get to decide how you use that money. We trust you, essentially. And that was fantastic, right? Because the data showed most families ended up spending it on things their children needed, like, school materials, clothing, food, etc. And what it did was, if it lifted millions of children out of poverty. Okay, so if you looked at how we define poverty, and I will not get into that right now for time, but basically a lot of kids were no longer classified as living in poverty because of this extra infusion of what was not a very large amount of cash per family, but actually made a key difference.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the kicker. We had the opportunity to continue that. But as all the pandemic stuff started to expire and sunset, Congress took this one up, and they declined to avail themselves of the opportunity to continue it. So suddenly, all these kids in the very next year fell back into poverty, and we had the largest single gain in terms of reducing poverty, and the largest single loss in terms of those gains happening, pretty much within 2 years. We still have these opportunities. The Congress can still come back to this and do this again. And there's been conversation back and forth as you and I are sitting here recording this. We're, just a week away from the election. Who knows? We'll see what happens, right? Based on who's in the White House, the composition of Congress, everything else. But the point I want to make here is, we have answers. We have solutions. We've even tested them out in the U.S. on a policy perspective. We can do this. We need to ask ourselves, is this something that we are willing to put the priority on and have people care? And I will tell you, many other people have asked this question. So New York Times columnist Nick Kristof was actually the first person we interviewed as part of a 5-part series on one of my own podcasts, the Reach Out and Read podcast. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a full column on this and has touched on it in numerous other columns, saying, why is it we can't get people to pay attention to this and to tell their policymakers, hey, this is important. We should be doing this. And he has some really good musings on that. And we talked about that in that first episode. Just how do we think and talk about this? But everything I've shared with you is what we discussed. And how do we get people to think about child poverty? Because of all the developed Western nations, we have the most children living in poverty by far.
Yeah.
And we don't think of that in this relatively wealthy, industrialized, modern country, but we have very high rates of child poverty.
Yeah. One of the things that we celebrate here on the podcast is that books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And I love the fact that kids can see themselves portrayed positively in the pages of books. But as an old white guy who grew up with books with images of people who look like me on every page, I really celebrate the fact that a book can be a window into other people's lives. And I'm really happy that your podcast and this podcast is hopefully giving people who have resources a chance to kind of look into the lives of people who don't have the same resources and get an idea of what we can do to kind of help out. I guess the first thing we can do is to pick up the phone or pick up our email machine and talk to our Congress people.
Certainly, I think doing that is a start, because very few people ever talk to their elected officials. So if as few as 10 people contact an office about a particular issue, that's considered to be pretty significant in terms of hearing about a particular topic. I think also it's how do we help ourselves, adults and children alike, use books and literature to also recognize that poverty is not simply just about a lack of money or a lack of resources, that there can be other things that come into it. When my daughter was young, she had a friend who was growing up in very different socioeconomic circumstances, and they made a play date, she's going to come over and spend time. Well, her friend no-showed. And my daughter was understandably upset, like, oh, does she not like me? Why didn't she come? Blah, blah, blah. And we had to carefully explain to her that, her mom probably got called into work at the last minute. She ran the risk of being fired if she didn't go to work on a moment's notice. And something like a play date was like, yeah, whatever. That's a secondary importance compared to keeping your job. And my daughter says now that was eye-opening for her to recognize that the privilege that we had of saying, oh, of course you're going to have this play date, and of course you're going to do everything to keep it, and you have two parents, and someone will be able to drive you to that play date, right, is not necessarily, there's a whole set of assumptions there that don't necessarily hold true for some families. So I think books can also offer that window into those different experiences, and kind of, I think, keep us from the trap of kind of like, oh, we need to help those poor families and communities that are out there somewhere else, and instead perhaps treat them with greater respect, and think about how we can offer a hand without necessarily, being overly haughty about it in ways that it's easy to fall into. Yes.
As somebody who grew up not in poverty, but pretty close, there were a lot of people, probably well-meaning, who wanted to help out that we didn't react to very well.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of attitude.
And I think, to bring it back for a moment to Reach Out and Read, one of the things I love about the Reach Out and Read intervention is that it honors the love parents have for their children and the potential of relational health, irrespective of socioeconomic status. So I could be talking to a parent who's very well off, highly educated, all these resources. They're just as anxious and nervous about making sure their kid is getting everything that they need, right? And being able to talk to them about shared reading and relational health is great. But likewise, I could then in the very next visit be talking to a family that struggles around many resources. And I'm not going to pretend that Reach Out and Read is going to magically solve hunger or housing insecurity or violence or anything like that, right? But it does offer that relational health piece, that same promise in its way. And I will say, this is hot off the press. Reach Out and Read is one of those types of interventions that we can scale massively. Right? There's some things that great outcomes, can't get them to enough families because they're pricey to do. So we also at the same time need to think about scalable interventions, and Reach Out and Read is one of them. So here's our latest numbers coming out soon. We have 6,500 clinics throughout the country that's serving 4.6 million children, distributing 7.7 million books, 39,000 clinicians that have been trained in the model and are using it, and that's 9.3 face-to-face interactions. That is scale. That is massive scale.
That is. Now, when Dr. Trudy was on, she shared with us a goal. Was it to get to 30 million?
Is to get to 10 million children by 2030.
10 million by 2030.
Which is 50% of children under age 5 in the U.S.
We're well on our way.
Yeah, we're somewhere north of a third. And different parts of the country at different places. I'm just going to brag that Wisconsin is well ahead of all of those. So, that it is an audacious goal, but it's a goal that I think we need to reach because, again, there's some programs that could never hope to get to even more than 10% of all kids. And don't get me wrong, some of those programs have the intensity that some of those families really do need. But then let's also think about the things we can take to scale. We're one of them. We could, theoretically, have every child in this country being touched by Reach Out and Read. Again, it's not going to solve everything, but man, it helps a lot and makes a difference to so many.
Absolutely. And there's no waste. It's not, there are a lot of programs that are out there that people go, oh, it's such a waste and it's helping this, but it's not helping that. I can't see any fat on the bone at Reach Out and Read.
I'm fond of saying that with Reach Out and Read, if you donate to Reach Out and Read, you're helping us buy books, you're helping us do the important training and technical assistance that helps the model keep standards and be in fidelity to the evidence base and all that. We are throwing in the doctors for free. I mean, what program tells you that? We don't pay doctors to do this. They don't pay us. We are throwing in the doctors for free, and that's the connection point that matters so much.
That's fantastic. If folks want to know more about Reach Out and Read, where should they go?
They can go to our website, which is www.reachouandread.org. And if you want to listen to our podcast, which has been going on for, we're in our 5th season now, over 120 episodes, that's at reachouandread.org/podcast.
And we can find it on all the different podcasting platforms?
They are all linked on that site, all the majors.
Awesome. So if you're listening and you subscribe to Reading with Your Kids, if I meet you out in public, I might just ask you to show me that you're also subscribed to the Reach Out and Read podcast.
Indeed.
We've had a great time speaking to our friend. He is the host of the Reach Out and Read podcast, Dr. Dipesh Navsaria. Dr. Dipesh, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks again for having me.
This episode is brought to you by the Logan series. 3 wonderful books written by Christine Ritchie McNamee. Logan and the Missing Masterpiece, Logan and the Lost Luggage, Logan and the Missing Jewels. Logan and the Lost Luggage is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read, and all 3 of these books feature Logan, an adorable Cocker Spaniel who travels the world with his magic phone. You and your kids are going to love traveling around the world with Logan, meeting animals from all over the world, visiting different countries, and learning how to get along with people from other countries and other cultures. It's a beautiful series of books. Our Reading with Your Kids certified great read panel loved Logan and the Last Luggage. We know you're going to love all 3 books. Check it out today. The Logan series by Christine Ritchie McNamee. This episode is brought to you by OnceUponADance.com. Take storytelling to a whole new level. With Once Upon a Dance, your child will do more than just listen. They'll move, imagine, and connect. It's a literary adventure and a performance all in one. From graceful turns to energetic leaps, each story brings an immersive experience that engages both body and mind. Whether your child enjoys unicorns, bats, zombies, or cats, Once Upon a Dance has a Dance It Out story just for them. Celebrate joyful movement and visit OnceUponADance.com or find them at your favorite social media platform. Join us right now from the wonderful city of Austin in Texas. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new children's book. It's called Sweet and Sour. Please welcome to the show, Kara Eng. Hey, Kara, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. We had a little bit of technical difficulties earlier. Kara is being incredibly patient with me, and I can't wait for her to tell us all about Sweet and Sour. What's this book all about, Kara?
Yeah, so my book, Sweet and Sour, just recently came out, and it's a story about the main character. Her name is Almond Cookie, and it's set in the magical land of Kingdom Candy. And so she has a candy shop that is so successful, and everyone loves it. However, the bad guy, Mr. Sour, he also has a candy shop called Trick or Treats, and he's jealous of her candy shop, so he breaks into her store and he sprinkles soy sauce all over her candies. And so when she finds out what happens, she's like, what do I do? And so as you read the story, you see how she's able to use this bad situation and turn it to good and embark on the sweet and sour adventure. So you have to read to find out what happens in the story.
Well, I love that this book is going to show kids a character who is resilient and doesn't fall apart when a tough situation arises.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so important to be able to use creativity and realize where you're at right now. You don't have to stay in this situation. You can use your mind and be able to turn that into good.
One of the things I hear, and I haven't experienced this in my life. I've worked with a lot of college students here on the podcast who intern with us, and they are incredibly talented and strong young people. But I keep hearing in the media and from others that, wow, young people today, they're just kind of fall apart. If somebody says a word or mentions an idea that is different from theirs, they just kind of fall apart and they don't seem like they have any resiliency. Is that something that you've experienced in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to really just talk about the differences that we have and our disagreements. I think it's important to have an open mind. And sometimes I think the best way to do that is just listen. And I found that when people see that you're open and willing to talk about that, or just to listen to what they have to say, like they feel like they are heard and they don't necessarily want advice. And so being able to work with them on that and just see where they're coming from, even though you might have like disagreements or something, that's what I think really speaks to being able to work together and bridge those gaps.
You know, you mentioned something that I had to learn, and it took me a long time to learn, and that is the idea that some people, they just need to be heard. They don't need you to solve their problems. They just need you to hear them kind of vent sometimes. And that was really difficult for me because I'm one of those people. It's like, okay, we got a problem. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get to work on it. And I had to slow down and be more mindful of the people that I'm speaking with. And I'm almost 100, and it took me a long time to figure that out. You figured it out a lot earlier than I did. How did you gain wisdom at such a young age?
Yeah. I think communication is a very powerful tool in and of itself. And it doesn't have to be just through speaking or the words. So when you listen to someone and when you offer, or if you just show them that you understand what they're talking about, that allows them to feel like they can be able to move forward. And like, for example, in the book, one of the characters, her name is Spearmint Stacy. When she tries a sweet and sour candy, she's like, oh, this tastes good. But she doesn't offer any solutions of what almond cookie should do. But I think when they work together and they're able to just bring comfort to one another, that helps them really move forward. And I think for me, I've just seen how it's important to really just be with that person by their side. And yeah.
I'm curious if the idea of Mr. Sour pouring soy sauce all over the cookies, did that come to you because of an incident that happened in your dorm at a party one night?
It didn't happen. So this is actually based on when I was a little girl. I loved candy and I loved Candyland. And actually it came from one of the projects that my mom would have us work on. As little kids, we were learning about how to write books. And my mom, she used to be a teacher, and so she was homeschooling us, and she's very hands-on and very project-based. So I thought it'd be really cool if I can incorporate my Chinese American culture into it. So like Asian themes of soy sauce and almond cookies into that. And I made that into one. And when I wrote that when I was 7 years old, I wrote it into a little book. I actually have it here. This is the original book when I was 7. And awesome. Yeah, and my little cousins and the kids that I would babysit loved to read it. And I thought to myself, it would be really cool one day if I could make this into a reality and make it a real book. And surprise, it did this year. And I'm so excited for how it's turned out. And I think I'm really able to connect with audiences and be able to show them like the diversity of different cultures and how they can incorporate that into different stories. So, yeah.
I love that. You know, we've had, we've celebrated, representation a lot here in the podcast over the past 7 years. And we've had a lot of authors on that celebrated Asian culture. One of the neat things that we've been able to talk about here is just the fact a lot of people, they just say Asian culture and they just throw everybody of Asian descent into one tent thinking, oh, yes, the Vietnamese and Chinese culture and Laotian culture, that's all just one thing. And in reality, they're very different.
Yeah.
I'm curious, because you mentioned your Asian American heritage. Do you find that your Asian American culture is a lot different than just a Chinese culture? Or is it really the same? I had this wonderful thought and it just left my head halfway through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I am Chinese American, so I think I grew up near Chicago, Chinatown, and the community there is very, very tight-knit. And I think despite, like, we have a lot of similarities, like the Korean Americans, the Vietnamese American, the Taiwanese. And I think we really want to just, even though we might have different cultural, like some different cultural backgrounds, I think we also share a lot of similarities. And so we're able to really just come together and feel like we can connect with one another and build each other up. So I'm totally indebted to my Chinese, or I guess the Asian American community at home, because they've reached out to other Asian Americans across the country to help promote my book, like as far as New York or California or different Asian American orgs that really want to be able to help other Asian Americans grow and pursue their passions.
That's really wonderful. One of the things we didn't mention early on is that you're not the youngest author that we've had on, but you are young. And so at 19 years old in college, probably a lot of spare time on your hands. You don't have a lot of homework or anything. Well, what inspired you to bring that story that you wrote as a 7-year-old and bring it to life and get it published at this time in your life?
Yeah. I think as a young girl, I just had so much creativity, so much imagination in my brain that I wanted to get it out and share that with others. And as I shared earlier, I think because communication is such a powerful tool, I think through the written word, I am able to share that with others and spread it across the world and at different times. And so I was able to really just share about my passions and interests with others through that. And I also want my readers to walk away with a sense of feeling inspired and motivated from the themes and motifs that they read from the books that I write. And I think one way that I want to share my talent is just through that.
Yeah. It's very, Kara and mentioned that she is originally from Chicago. I was just in Chicago for the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, and I noticed a really interesting phenomena. So we had books from 7 authors, and they were very diverse books. And it was interesting what brought people over to the booth. I noticed there are a number of African-American families would come over, and we had 2 books by an African-American author with those characters, African-American characters, on the covers. Mm-hmm. And when the families would walk by and they would see this, they would right over and picked up those books and really were interested in those books. We also had a book, Feliz Navidad. And when the Spanish-speaking families came by, that is what grabbed them. We talked about representation on the show, but it was it was so vivid, like it was like right there. It's almost, if I was smart enough, it would have been like a science experiment, like what's drawing these people over. Can you talk a little bit more about how important it is for kids and families to see themselves represented positively on the pages of books?
Yeah, for sure. I actually went to different schools to talk about this, and I went to schools that were predominantly Asian or predominantly Hispanic or predominantly African American. And I wanted to share that, the cultures that you come with, your cultural backgrounds, you are able to share something so unique and incorporate that into your stories. And I shared that even though mine is about, it incorporates Asian American or Asian themes in it, the soy sauce and almond cookie and all that stuff. You guys can also do the same thing too. And I think it's so valuable being able to take pride in that and instill that instill that pride in your book and in your projects and passions, and just showing how rich in culture it is. I think that's so important.
Yeah. And, being an old white guy who grew up with most of the books had people who looked like me in it, I really appreciated both when I was a kid and also as a dad, bringing those books that gave me a chance to look through a window into a different culture. Our family library when my kids were young was very diverse, and it was wonderful to kind of look and get to know other cultures through stories, and that inspired us to host international kids in our home, which was a real blessing.
Definitely. Yeah, I think being an individual, like you each have your unique personalities and characteristics. And I also do that in this book. If you look through the pictures and illustrations, like no one character is the same, and they're all different. They all have different physical characteristics, physical features, and personalities. And so I think I really want to embody that in the book and be able to show the kids that read my book, or the readers that read my book, that, they also have things like those too.
Yeah. So super. Curious, is writing children's books something that you intend to pursue as a career?
Yes, for sure. I hope to really be able to continue like a series of this Kingdom Candy, the sweet and sour book, because actually at the book talks that I was at for different schools, I was like, did you enjoy the book? And they said, yes. And I said, some of them asked me, can you write another one? Like, when's the next one? I was like, that's a good question. I should start writing more books to create a series about that. And I think just being able to see the joy on the kids' faces and be able to inspire them to, with just these lessons of pursuing your passions and using bad ideas for good, I think it's just so touching, so heartwarming.
Yeah. And it seems like you are on top of one of the things that we've talked about here on the podcast, because we do have a lot of authors and aspiring authors. You seem to be very much aware that as an author, you are the CEO of a small business. And so reaching out to different Asian communities around the country was a really genius idea. Was that something that just came to you naturally, or did you have somebody sharing advice with you?
Yeah, I would definitely attribute that to, I could not have done it on my own. And I definitely attribute it to my mom, who helped me so much. I would say she was like my secretary almost in a way. And also the local Asian American community not just the local Asian American community, but Asian American communities across the nation. And I would attribute it to just seeing how much God worked in my life. I was asking him, like, I want to be able to share this message with others and be able to really just inspire people. And I really wanted to incorporate my faith into this as well. So just seeing how it all worked together, and like also the local news from Chicago was able to share about my books too. So I think that's what highlighted everything and brought it together.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask your idea on something and how you feel about something. I grew up late at night listening in my little transistor radio, which was like this little thing. We actually we didn't get our entertainment or shows coming on a cable or through Wi-Fi. We had these little radios, and I would put them underneath my pillow at night and listen. And there was a talk show host. He was the overnight host here in Boston. His name was Larry Glick. And he was wonderful. And he was one of these guys who would talk to people who were abducted by aliens and, thought they had 18 different lives beforehand. And everybody who had a prior life was like a king or a queen. There was no one who was like a busboy in an earlier. Yeah. So it was really fascinating, and I loved it. But if he had somebody call up referring to themselves as an Asian American, he would say, no, you are an American of Asian descent. And he would really kind of emphasize that. No, we're first Americans, and our families came from somewhere. What would you say if Larry was here and you were on his show and he corrected you or suggested, no, it's not Asian American, it's an American of Asian descent? What might you say to him?
I think that's that's an interesting way to put it. I would say, yes, we are American, all of us, but I want to emphasize, like, yes, I am American, but I'm also Asian American because I think, it shows how much we take pride in our background and our cultural upbringing. Seeing how much my grandparents and my great-grandparents and my parents all came together and worked hard to come from that. I think, yes, we are all collectively American, but I want to be able to showcase how much I value being Asian American or Chinese American because of just the hardships that they face and seeing how they put it to work and strove to really just have a better life for us here now. I think it's important to really acknowledge that.
I agree. My family immigrated from Ireland and really struggled. So I do appreciate the fact that we can honor those people who sacrificed to give us a better life.
Yes.
I love that. Hey, Kara, where can we go to find out more about Sweet and Sour, find out more about you, and be able to find out when the next book in your series is coming out?
Yeah, so you can find my book on Amazon. You can put in Sweet and Sour. And I also have more information on my website, karaengauthor.com. And you can keep looking for updates on Facebook and Instagram. It's kara.eng.author. And I'll be giving updates about what's happening and where you can find my books in local bookstores or libraries. And so that's where you can find the bulk of the information.
Yeah. I think it would be so cool if I were to go, if my family were going out to have dinner at a Chinese restaurant, if I saw Sweet and Sour on the counter after I was walking in and asking for a table for four, I think I'd buy that book so we could talk about it at dinner.
Yeah, that would be so cool. I actually have, I mentioned in the story, she talks about eating the sweet and sour fish. And then she mentions how it tastes like the sweet and sour fish dish, but in candy form. So I think it would just spark a lot of good conversations. And that's such a good idea. I should ask if I get home if maybe they would want to have my book there and be able to have people look at it and buy it.
Yeah, that's really cool. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Sweet and Sour. It's a new children's book from our guest, Kara Eng. Kara, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. The best way to make sure you don't miss a moment of the show is to subscribe to the show on whatever platform you are listening to now. Of course, if you're listening on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, we'd love for you to reach out to your local station manager, tell them that you love Reading with Your Kids. And, of course, we love the iHeartRadio app. We love Spotify, Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. Wherever you find the show, we love that app. Also, love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, and at JedlyMagic on Twitter. And, of course, our website is a great place to get in touch with us. There's a contact button up at the top of the page that'll give you a chance to let us know what you love about the show, let us know what we could be doing better, and let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show. And authors, readingwithyourkids.com is also the place you want to go to find out how you can be a guest here in the show. And being a guest will give you the chance to tell thousands of Kidlit fans all around the world about your fantastic children's book. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Dr. Dipesh Navsaria. Please be sure to check out Reach Out and Read. What a wonderful organization. I love what they are doing. I also want to thank Kara Eng. Please be sure to check out her debut children's book, Sweet and Sour. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Ray Ling Tang, I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.